Hello, Birdland. I'm Nikhil Mehta. This is Daniel Rotter, and we are the Baltimore Birdwatchers, a brand new podcast hosted by Utah Street Report covering all things Orioles. You may know me from Russell Street Report, my Ravens coverage over the last couple of years, but I'm really excited to expand into more Orioles coverage, starting with this podcast. With me today is Daniel Rotter, a longtime friend of mine and a lifelong Orioles fan who writes about fantasy baseball for Sports Ethos and knows pretty much everything there is to know about the Orioles. Daniel, great to have you.
I'm so excited to be starting this podcast with you here, Nikhil. I think that we are going to do a great job providing fans with additional information about the team and just experiencing the highs and lows with them.
Yeah, I think that last part that you mentioned is really key about the Orioles is the highs and lows and kind of the emotional roller coaster this team tends to take you on. And I think the first half of this season was just a fantastic example of that. There were the highs, the lows, everything in between. Daniel, what were your overall feelings about the first half before we dive into some of the specifics?
I would grade the first half of the season as an A. To be in first place in the AL East, regardless of what the margin is, and regardless of 1 week before the All-Star break being a struggle, we're exactly where we wanted to be entering the All-Star break, and that's in first place. And we saw some growth from our young players, even though there's been struggles along the way. I think that all we can do is sit back and realize that this is exactly where we wanted to be in mid-July.
Yeah, I think I'm with you as an A. And I had them at a B plus, I'll be honest, coming in. And when you explained it, I was like, you know what? Can you really knock a team down for injuries, for getting injured? I think you can point out that the front office was relying a little bit too much on players returning from injury this year, especially the pitching staff. But it's also, can you really knock a team's performance because they're pitching? And in spite of those injuries, they are still in first place in the AL East. And so I agree. I think it's been an A start to the season for the Orioles. They've got a pretty tough second half in front of them. I think with that pitching staff, we'll talk about it a bit later. But first, I want to launch into our first half awards that we're going to be handing out. MVP. I think this one's pretty easy because he's one of the leading candidates for AL MVP, and that's Gunnar Henderson. What does it feel like to watch Gunnar Henderson play baseball?
So I missed the Cal Ripken era. I missed the 90s Orioles baseball where there was a lot of successful teams. But Gunnar Henderson, I can confidently say, is the best Oriole I've ever watched in my life. And he's only 22 years old. I can already say I have never seen this kind of production from Manny Machado or anybody else for that matter. What he brings to the table every night is just an electric hitter, one of the best hitters in the game. And he backs it up with tremendous defense at shortstop. The highlight reel plays are amazing, even though occasionally there's some mental lapses. You got to expect that from a 22-year-old. And also, the hustle is something that we rarely saw from a guy like Machado, even when he was younger. Gunnar is always running out every ground ball. He's trying to get the extra base, running first to third well. And it's just overall impressive. I mean, every day I'm in awe when I watch this guy play baseball.
Yeah, I think, the easy comp is he is the Orioles Lamar Jackson. Anytime that he is involved in a play, it is appointment viewing. And, I think that comp really fits when you think about the electricity with which Gunnar plays, and the way he emotionally plays the game. He cares about winning. I'm not no one on that team. I think there are a lot of competitors on that team. I don't know that any of them want to win more than Gunnar Henderson. And I think that element is going to help him grow into being, he probably already is a leader in the locker room, but I think he's going to grow and grow as a leader because when you're Jackson Holiday, your Kobe Mayo, when some of these younger guys get in, Gunner's going to be the veteran mentor at that point for some of these guys, some of the guys that are getting drafted now. And so that emotionality that he can really tap into. And the mental lapses, I think, are never connected to the emotionality. I think that's important as well, that his mental lapses tend to be over aggression, moving too fast when he's fielding. The emotionality seems to never come into play. It's always, I want to get the extra base. I'm aggressive, but I want that extra base. But it's not a mental lapse because honestly, he's rarely getting thrown out when he's taking all these extra bases. It's pretty smart. MVP is pretty easy. And I think that's the same when it comes to Cy Young because the Orioles have arguably the best pitcher in baseball. Corbin Burns has just been dominant. So if there's a Cy Young for the Orioles, he gets it here. But, you know, he's the kind of true blue ace. You talked about not seeing Cal Ripken, and same for me. I didn't see Cal Ripken. Mike Messina, obviously, guys like Jim Palmer are way before our time. We have never seen this kind of true blue ace in Baltimore um, in our lifetimes. And it's the kind of thing we've been talking about having for years and years. And there were so many players that were supposed to be really good and just never panned out. Your Dylan Bundys, there were so many years that Chris Tillman was starting opening day, and it's just I can't believe that we actually made it and we got a guy who you can honestly say is the best pitcher in baseball.
I totally agree with you. And going along with the fact of all those guys who we were supposed to develop into aces, we saw some of those guys find it on another team. We saw Jake Arrieta find it in Chicago. We found Kevin Gossman in San Francisco and Toronto. He found out how to be an ace and never really harnessed it here. So to get that guy who had already been established as an ace and just insert him right into our rotation and see no change has really been just so exciting to see. Even though we've seen a bit of a dip in his strikeouts from his Cy Young year a couple years ago, he's not even striking out a batter every inning, but he's still effectively commanding the zone. He's keeping hitters off balance. He's towards the top of the league in ERA and WHIP, and his fastball velo is still great. He's just a nightmare for hitters to see. And even though a guy we're going to talk about shortly, Tarek Skubal, might be having a better statistical season, the AL All-Star manager Bruce Bochy still wanted to give Corbin Burnes, a more veteran pitcher, the nod just because of how successful he's been at limiting traffic and limiting runs.
Yeah, and I think both of the guys that we just talked about, Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Burnes, are going to they're in full contention for both of these awards league wide. They're not just leading the Orioles in this way; they're leading the league. What about the rest of the Orioles rotation, Daniel? What takes do you have on what the rest of the rotation has done the first part of the season? What are you worried about? What are you excited about?
I think Grayson Rodriguez is obviously a controllable top end of the rotation pitcher who's going to be pitching important games for us for the foreseeable future, as we all expected. I want to shout out Albert Suarez because, man, we picked him off the scrap heap and he has given us very important innings. And not only has he been giving us those innings, he's been giving us quality outings, even if they're not registered as, the 6 innings, 3 runs or less quality starts. I mean, for a guy who is 36 that we found basically out of nowhere, when he's giving us 5 innings of 2, 3 runs, that feels like a quality start because, man, we didn't deserve to have those innings. Like, we should not have found this guy randomly to be pitching like this, which is super exciting. I'm not the biggest Dean Kramer guy. I think that he's kind of a 5, but those innings are important for us right now, so he's going to keep throwing them. Cade Povich's walks do worry me, but he pitched really well in AAA, so hopefully he can figure it out. And if he doesn't figure out, it looks like McDermott might be the easy switch. Povich goes down, McDermott comes up, and we see if McDermott can be any more effective. But there's certainly a lot of question marks, and can Albert Suarez continue to be this effective is definitely one of them.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing we're talking about the grade, and it's the kind of thing where the pitching has arguably overperformed relative to the talent that you would expect in the first half. Suarez, Cole Irvin had a really strong stretch before he started to fall apart again, but that stretch with Cole Irvin was crucial to have him putting together a couple quality starts when we needed him. He's back in the bullpen now where he should be, but I think that you mentioned Suarez, you mentioned Povich. Povich has just he's come up ahead of schedule, and I think that's also important when you think about his development. He has come up ahead of schedule for when he should have been up here, and is just slugging his way through some tough outings. It kind of reminds me of Grayson. Grayson last year just slugging his way through tough outings, and I'm really hoping that Povich getting some of those tough outings now is going to help him kind of understand, similar to Grayson, you don't need to strike everyone out and you need to not walk people, especially in the majors. Like that is huge. One thing on Grayson I want to add, I think 46.5% of his runs have come in 3 of his starts. Otherwise, he's been excellent. He's been a quality start machine otherwise. And I think once he figures out just how to prevent those blow up holes, it's kind of like in golf, right? If your blow up hole is a double bogey instead of quadruple bogey, it's going to help your overall score in general every time. And I think it's the same with Grayson Rodriguez. If his blow up game can be 4 or 5 runs instead of 6 or 7, that's the kind of deficit this lineup can absolutely overcome. So I think I'm very happy with how the pitching staff has done to start the season, given the injuries. But like you said, a lot of question marks going into the second half, and we're going to get into some of the potential answers to that later and certainly on future podcasts. Next award is Gold Glove, one that Baltimore is very familiar with. For my money, I think Adley Rutschman has kind of delivered on that stabilizing, not just stabilizing catcher, but stabilizing franchise player. And it starts from how he catches. Gold Glove is not handed out for how a catcher calls a game, right? But I think that's a big part of the position of catcher. And I think that is something that Adley does so well is managing the pitching staff. He has to really do a lot to maintain attitudes, maintain focus, and also be calling the right pitches. And I think that his ability to do all that while being a plus catcher, I think there was some concern about his inability to throw people out early in the season, but he's turned on his arm, I feel like, in the last month or so. And otherwise, his fielding has been immaculate. I think he has like maybe one error the whole year. And overall, he's exactly what you ask for in a franchise catcher behind the plate. I think there are guys with better arms. There are guys with, who maybe slightly better defensively. But for what you're getting in Adley, my thing with him really that's core is his leadership and ability to just manage the pitching staff.
And I absolutely hear you on Adley. He's the guy that made this team go from the beginning, that turned this losing into winning, and it all starts with his reputation with the pitchers behind the dish. I'm going to shout out another guy for the Gold Glove Award as my nomination, and I'm going to give it to Colton Cowser, who had a really difficult cup of tea in the majors last year. But despite his recent struggles at the plate, he actually has been a pretty elite outfield defender. In the leading metric for defense in the StatCast era, it's outs above average, and Colton Cowser has 10 outs above average, which is in the top 1% of all of baseball. His arm strength is in the top 2% of all of baseball. And it's not like he's playing in the same place every night. We've used him in center to spell Cedric Mullins during his slumps at the plate. We've used him in that big, spacious left field as like a second center fielder. And when we go on the road, we're using him in multiple spots in stadiums that he's not really very familiar with yet because it's his first time going through a full major league season. So I think to play as a versatile outfielder and still be as elite as he is really speaks to what we're going to see from him down the road. And I think that the bat is going to come around too, but that's obviously a conversation for another time because we're praising his glove right now. So I'm a big fan of what he's done in the outfield. He's been a huge help to spell our struggling veteran outfielders, and I can't wait to see what highlight reel plays are going to come next out of him.
Yeah, I think his play in center field is unfortunately signaling that Cedric Mullins' time with the Orioles is going to come to an end soon. I think we've been, thinking that for a few years with Cowser and the other outfielders in mind, but it's very clear now defensively that that was the one thing that Mullins had above almost anyone else that you could think of is his defense. And like you're saying, Cowser is right up there with SETI. He's right up there with everybody in these advanced statistics, and could absolutely be a successor. Going from the field to behind the plate, Silver Slugger. I know we talked about Gunnar Henderson, but I want to shout out two guys here, and then I want to see what you got, Daniel. Tony Taters with just a huge June really was a huge part of the Orioles' ability to blast through that month, that really, really tough schedule. I think they had one off day the entire month. And his ability to just keep pumping out home runs was really big for their ability to keep winning games. Jordan Westberg's the other guy I want to give a shout out here, specifically because I think he's going to be a guy who contends for the Silver Slugger Award at third base in the future because it's just not as strong of a position. So he's not playing shortstop. He's not competing against Gunnar, all the other best hitters in the game. I think he's going to get a look at some Silver Sluggers once he settles into that 25 plus home run range that I feel like he'll be in. I really think that his approach at the plate in particular has been one of the most consistent this whole season. I think there have been times when even Gunnar and Adley have gotten a little too aggressive at the plate, and Westberg is there usually later in the lineup, although he's been moved up lately to just kind of settle things down and get a rally going.
Before I get into my guy, I just want to say how awesome have those two players been? I totally agree with you on everything you've said. Tony just holds a special place in my heart. He's one of my favorite Orioles now, I think, after being with us kind of towards the end of the Machado and Jones era, suffering through the whole rebuild. And then now here he is, a huge part of our thriving team that's winning now. I love that. And I love the grittiness that Jordan Westburg brings to the Orioles every day. I totally am with you on both of those points. That is awesome. I'm going to go with the super basic answer. So I apologize. I just wanted to give more statistical data about Gunnar Henderson as opposed to the more anecdotal stuff that we were talking about earlier. So right now he's slashing 286, 373, 584 slug. That's good for a 957 OPS, which if you're not familiar, that's pretty sick. Um, he is in the 96th percentile in xWOBA, which is a pretty recent development in the statistical world. But being in the top 4% of that tells you he's one of the major league's best hitters. He's in the top 3% in average exit velocity, which means when he gets up to the plate, if you've watched those games, you know this, he's hitting the crap out of the ball. Every time he puts the bat on the ball, it's hit hard, whether it's in someone's glove, hitting the grass, or hitting the seats over the fence. He is absolutely demolishing baseballs, which is pretty apparent if you've seen him play. And the last thing is he is a 168 weighted runs created plus, which means, according to Fangraphs, he is 68% better than an average major league hitter. Unreal stuff from Gunnar.
That's a huge difference. And I think, I mean, I just mentioned Westberg as someone who could win this award in real life at the end of the season. I think Gunnar is pretty much a shoe in for Silver Slugger at shortstop. It'll be him and Witt. It'll be a fun competition. I think he's out hitting Witt. He's certainly out hitting Witt. I think Witt's got him in the base paths. Not that that mattered for Silver Slugger, but yeah, I can't see anyone but Gunnar winning that award at the end of the year. And I think it's the first of many awards, specifically that one that he's going to pick up. My next one is it's a bittersweet award. It's the We Miss You Felix Award for the best reliever because man, I think Orioles fans have been spoiled for really the last decade plus in terms of closers. They went from Jim Johnson to Zach Britton to Felix Bautista, and those three players are three of the best closers of the last 15 years, right? Britton was unbelievable, should have won the Cy Young that year. I'll take that to my grave. And now people are complaining about Craig Kimbrell a lot, but I think he's been the best reliever the Orioles have had this year. He's been one of the better relievers in the American League. I think it only goes to highlight how hard that job is, how hard coming in the ninth with a slim lead is, because he does have those blown saves, but he also has I think he has as many saves this year as he had last year. And so there's pluses and minuses to Kimbrel. It's a roller coaster, and the blown saves are a thing. But I think that part of that is just we're used to Felix. We're used to an auto save, and we don't get that anymore with Kimbrel. And we got to really sweat out these innings. But he has been as good as anyone else in Major League Baseball, pretty much in those high pressure situations. It is really hard to ask for more than what he is giving. I think it's easy to get upset at a guy who's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, not pitching completely lights out, but he's at the very tail end of his career at this point, and he's still pitching at a very high level for his age.
Nikhil, I agree with you on Kimbrel. I think that he gets a little too much hate in the Orioles Twitterverse. He's doing an outstanding job, and it's not like we paid him Edwin Diaz money. We're paying him what, 10 million on a 1 year deal? I mean, that's good money for a reliever, but it's not elite money, and I think he's given us at least the production that we're paying him for. I wanted to give a couple other guys a shout out. I wanted to talk about Yennier Cano. It hasn't been as easy as it was last year for Cano, but the numbers have still been pretty solid. He has a sub-3 ERA. He's striking out almost a batter every inning. His barrel rate is pretty good, meaning he's doing a good job of missing barrels. I think the concerns have just been some control issues. He's walking a lot of batters. His whip is a little bit dicey. A lot of that I think comes from his explosive stuff. I think it moves so much that it's hard for him to harness, even no matter how much he practices. And so you're going to see ups and downs where he's struggling to locate it. He's going to need to make mechanical tweaks to best suit him. And the other guy I wanted to mention is Jacob Webb, just because he's our most used reliever. We picked this guy up off of waivers last year, and he's played a huge part in pitching important innings for this team. So those two guys have also made a big contribution.
I think the thing about Webb is I'm never afraid or upset when he's entering a game. There are times when Kimbrel's entering a game that I think he shouldn't be. There are times that even that Cano has entered a game and I've been like, is this the best use of Cano right now? There's never a time where I'm upset to see Jacob Webb take the mound. And that's honestly, that's one of the highest compliments I could give to a reliever. Reliever is one of the toughest, most thankless jobs in professional sports, in my opinion, because you don't have the stuff to be a starter, but you are expected to pitch lights out, shutout innings every time, and that's just not how it works. And I think that Webb has been as consistent as you get, and you know what you're going to get from him. Speaking of those decisions, though, to bring pitchers out, let's talk about some questionable decisions that the Orioles have made in the first half this year. Um, to me, it's Brandon. It goes back to the bullpen decisions that Brandon Hyde has made, specifically his insistence on lefty righty matchups and trying to get lefties in against lefties, righties in against righties. But when he does that, he ignores reverse splits. He ignores that Keegan Aiken, for example, is better against righties than he is against lefties. And he brings Aiken in against lefties and gets shelled. And to me, it's like you are so close to making all of these right decisions. You just need to remember reverse splits and things like that, because I think there have been too many times that we have seen him kind of ignore the reverse splits of a lefty who's good against righty or a righty who's good against lefties and gone with that lefty lefty matchup that with a player like Aiken who's actually worse against lefties. So, I don't want to beat that horse too dead, because I know bullpen decision making half the time it's not going to make a difference what pitcher you put in, because they just got to come in and make their pitches. But I do think guys that have some of those more severe splits, you got to play off of that, even if it goes antithetical to your kind of traditional baseball perspective.
Being a manager's a thankless job, isn't it? If Brandon Hyde got fired tomorrow, the next guy that came in, we would be critiquing his bullpen decisions too. So I think for my questionable decision, I'm going to go away from that. I'm going to talk about Mike Elias, whom I love, but one decision has kind of irked me all season. Even from the get go, I was really advocating that Ramon Arias should not be on this team. Connor Norby had already spent a whole season in AAA last year and looked like he was ready to just plug in from the jump. We tried the holiday experiment. We gave it a fair shot. He just wasn't quite ready yet. And I still think if Ramon Arias had just been moved for whatever, cash considerations, a lottery ticket prospect, or we just released him, I think that would have largely been pretty inconsequential towards our whole unit going forward with winning. I hate to compare him and his brother like they're the exact same player, but they kind of are similar. Him and Luis are both glove first, right handed hitting infielders, and they don't provide a lot of production offensively. Luis has bounced around the majors the past few years, bounced between the majors and AAA. And just to see Ramon have such a secure spot on this team, even into this year, is interesting to me because he's in the bottom 15% in the league in outs above average. And I know he was a gold glove winner in 2022, but he's not even providing us with average defense, according to that metric. I know that he's established himself as a quality glove, and he's well liked probably by his teammates for being there since we've been struggling. I just think this is an opportunity that we could have used to really get Norby in there, even despite Holiday struggles. If we gave Holiday a shot, this still happened. Then Norby moves in as the primary second baseman, Westberg's the third, and Mateo's the utility guy. And I don't understand why Connor Norby is still wasting away in AAA while Ramon Arias is little used and also providing us little value.
Yeah, if you felt like Norby needed the AAA at bats, that's one thing, but he doesn't. There's nothing else he can do at AAA, and yeah, I mean, really, Urias's best things he doesn't strike out a lot, and that's maybe the best thing he's got going for him. But he's not even quite a league average hitter anymore, and I think once he drops below the point of league average hitter, and the glove is no longer that valuable, this is a conversation that we're going to have about Cedric Mullins too at some point. That I kind of hinted at is that once the bat goes away and you actually have gloves, you have better hitters can play that can play defense just fine. I mean, Kobe Mayo has looked quite good at third base in AAA. And so, I think that I understand why Reese is on the roster to start the season. I don't see him. I think he's a guy that after the All-Star break should really be looked at as a DFA. Yeah, Daniel, ultimately, I do agree about Arias. I think that he's a guy that's pretty easy to move on from now that you've got the gloves behind him, and those gloves can hit better. quite frankly, Urias is just not a league average hitter anymore. And once he drops below that league average hitter, the glove just isn't worth it anymore. So moving on to the next award that we got, which is the Orioles Magic Award, which is, you know, the emotionality with the Orioles that we talked about, the roller coaster that we talked about at the top of the pod. I'm going to go with that stretch of June, the Phillies and Yankees back-to-back series. June itself was a crazy month. I think it was a really exciting month to see the Orioles go up against all these tough teams, sweep the Rays in Tampa, things like the split four with Toronto in Toronto. But then the big one, obviously, were those interleague series against the Braves, the Phillies, and the series against the Yankees. That the Orioles took all three of those series. The Philly series and the Yankee series in particular were just master classes of this Orioles lineup flexing. Basically, they're just like, we have the best lineup in Major League Baseball. We think we're the best team in Major League Baseball, and we're just going to drop runs on you. They blew up Zach Wheeler, and that game and the Yankees game later that week, in which they put up, what was that, 17 runs, right, Daniel? Those two games were just constant power up and down the lineup. It was everyone producing. And, going back to Urias, that is the potential of this lineup when you start to cycle out your Urias and your Mullins and your prospects like your Mayo and your Cowser start to fill those spots. That's the potential of this lineup to be loaded 1 to 9. That's really the vision that Elias has had, I think, for the last couple of years, is the idea of building up through prospects a lineup that is strong 1 to 9. And I think that's why he wants to hold on to these prospects so much, is because when you have that full, complete lineup and you're able to go out and say there's no one you can pitch around, there's no one that's an easy out, it just makes the life for other teams, for other pitching staffs, really, really hard, especially through a whole series, because these guys are getting multiple at bats off their relievers and they're seeing them multiple times. And I think those two series, the Phillies and Yankees series, really exemplified where this lineup could really ascend to in future seasons.
That June was a difficult stretch of Orioles baseball to watch, not because we were playing poorly, but because we were constantly playing good competition. So I was always nervous every day going into the game. Oh gosh, I hope that we get this win. I hope that we're able to hit against good pitching again and survive this long month that dragged on with just one off day. My favorite moments of the season, one caused me absolutely no emotional damage, and one caused me quite a bit of emotional damage. So we'll start on a good note with opening day. Corbin Burns takes the ball against the Angels at home in front of a sellout crowd, and everyone is excited to see the new Orioles ace come in and light up a bad team. In the first inning, oh God, Mike Trout just clocked a home run and we're losing 1 to 0. After that, final stat line: 6 innings, 1 hit, 1 run, no walks, 11 strikeouts. Corbin Burns is here in Baltimore and coming for a Cy Young Award. And that I thought was awesome. I really enjoyed watching Corbin Burns' first start, and I think it really set the tone for what's coming here in Baltimore. What we've seen now, talking about this in July. Another really, really fun moment was about to be my least favorite moment until some fielding gaffes really, really changed how we all felt about that game. So on Sunday, we all got up bright and early for our 11:30 a.m. Roku Sunday showcase. Dean Kramer and Carlos Rodon were enjoying an entertaining mid-off where neither of them made it through the fifth inning, and we entered into the ninth inning in a game where Craig Kimbrell was looking to lock down a save in a one-run game. Up come the 8 and 9 hitters. Both of them walk. Oh God, here we go. Then the Yankees' young first baseman, who's been doing a great job, Ben Rice, comes up. Kimbrell grooves him one, and now we're losing 5-3. I'm about ready to throw my remote through the TV. But Clay Holmes comes in to pitch in the bottom half of the ninth. And we're able to get something cooking. We get runners on base, we get walks, and then the big moment happens. There's a ground ball to shortstop with the bases loaded. It could not be more of a routine, ordinary play, and the moment was just a little bit too big for Anthony Volpe. He bobbles the ball, and suddenly now we're only down by 1 run, 5-4. And then our defensive replacement, Cedric Mullins, comes up to hit against Clay Holmes. He had not received an at-bat in this game. He puts a good charge into a baseball the other way to left field. This ball had a 99% catch probability. It was well hit, and I condemn Cedric on his efforts for putting a well hit ball in play in that situation because that's a tough moment to hit in a 1 run game, bases loaded against a division rival. We are on the verge of getting swept. He hits the ball hard, but Alex Verdugo, come on, man! What did they always teach you growing up? The first step is back. He charges in on the ball, and it goes over his head as he falls embarrassingly to the ground. And the Orioles celebrate. Yankees fans said they celebrated like it was their World Series. But man, we had just lost every game that week. We were excited to get that win. And guess what? You can hate on our celebration all you want, but we needed that so bad. And to go into the All-Star break a game in first place was a great moment for us to end the first half on.
Yeah, and I think, I really like the moments that you chose there because it really bookended the half, right? The first game and the last game showcasing that Orioles magic, which is the super consistent dominance of Burns, that it's its own kind of magic, and then the absolute chaos that was brought about by a lot of patient at bats and a lot of good contact in that last inning. And that's what this Orioles lineup is all about. And again, pitching, batting. Those are the two things this team is built around. That's how they're going to win, not just the rest of the season, but if and when they make the playoffs. That's how they're going to win in the playoffs, is by just those kind of rallies and those kind of dominant starts from guys like Burns. So I want to move a little bit here into prospects and talk about some of the younger guys on the team. So prospect of the first half, and just to clarify, guys who debuted, like Heston Kjerstad's going to be eligible. We could talk about Cade Povich, or we could talk about guys in the minor leagues. Just pick a couple prospects you really like in this first half, Daniel.
I apologize for the basic answers in advance, but I'm going to talk about Kobe Mayo, who has a 983 OPS with 19 home runs, currently in AAA. Well, I know I already talked about this. Ramon Arias is on the team. And also Heston Kjerstad, who, first of all, I hope he's okay. He's currently on the 7-day concussion IL after getting drilled in the head. He also in AAA was hitting 301. He is making Kobe Mayo's OPS look measly with a 997 AAA OPS. And he also hit 16 home runs in AAA, albeit he had less time in AAA because he spent time in the majors as well. I think they've both hit 19 home runs total on their season if you put Heston's home runs in the majors and AAA combined. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Both of them have been outstanding bats that are known around the league by teams looking to rebuild as guys they would want in a trade package badly because they have the potential to be game changers offensively if we traded them tomorrow for the other team or for us for that matter.
Yeah, I think those two, you did say those are some of the stock answers. I'm going to go with my favorite prospect of the first half first, and that is Cade Povich. We've talked about him a little bit. Um, Part of it is I just really love that curveball, but I think the other part of it is he is coming up and he is kind of taking some of those tough starts. He's getting through them. He's working through them now, the same way that Grayson Rodriguez did last year. He doesn't have the top end range of outcomes that Grayson Rodriguez does, but that's not really what we're going to ask of him. If you think about where the rotation is, and where it's going to head in the future, assuming the Orioles add another veteran starter this offseason, which is certainly no guarantee, but it kind of feels like will be necessary given the injuries and surgeries that most of the rotation is going through. If Povich has to come in next season as a 3 or a 4, I think you're not in bad shape after he's gotten this experience in this year and he's given a chance to have a steady rotation spot from the beginning of the year. He has his rapport with Adley built up and he's just more comfortable in the majors. I think that he came up on short notice and a lot was asked of him. And I think he delivered for the most part. He's not a quality start machine the way Grayson is. He struggles with his control, like you mentioned. But I think those are things that are similar to what Grayson started out as last year. And while Povich doesn't, like I said, have that same ace level outcome in his potential, I still think that the Orioles kind of have a path for pitchers coming up. And they're like, okay, you're going to have to learn to settle down. You got to learn how to, pitch to contact and not just try and get strikeouts every time like you did in AAA. So the other guy I want to shout out is Sam Basayo, not just because of how great he's been this year. And he has been amazing this year. He's doing things at his age that, Juan Soto did. And anytime you're doing something that Juan Soto did at your age as a baseball prospect, you're doing something very, very well. But the other thing about Basayo that's huge for him is, yes, he could be a huge contributor to the Orioles in coming years. His major league ETA, because he's so young, is a little bit further away than even, obviously Mayo and Holiday will be up very soon. But the other potential that Basayo offers is he does play catcher. And with Adley, that does mean you can potentially trade him. And his breakout this season has really raised his trade value. And I think that is the other really big thing about his performance this year is that it's not just what he could do for the Orioles in the future, but it's actually what he could do for them right now if he's traded and brings in, and you mentioned it, a Tariq Skubal, a great, kind of elite pitcher that this team needs. Basayo's the kind of, I think coming into this year, I don't think Basayo is the centerpiece of a deal for one of the favorites for the Cy Young Award at the trade deadline coming into this year. But I think his performance in the first half has elevated him to that status. And this moves me directly into my next question for you, Daniel, which is of the Orioles' three kind of core prospects right now, Kobe Mayo, Jackson Holliday, and Sam Basayo, who do you think is most likely to be moved? And the other one I throw in there potentially is Heston Kjerstad.
I think the one most likely to be moved, in my opinion, is Basayo, only because I think Jackson Holliday is a little bit of Mike Elias's golden boy. I have a hard time believing that Mike Elias is going to trade him after all of the, promoting Matt Holliday in the organization and the belief to give him the debut at such a young age. And also, he's reassured recently that he thinks Holliday is a big part of our team in the second half. I really don't think he's going to go anywhere. And I think Mayo's proximity to the majors is what's going to keep him as a preferred option to stay, just because he could come in and help us right now if Mike Elias does get rid of Arias or there's a trade where some other infielder is moved. I think Basayo is probably the one. And I would hate to see him go because a lot of people said this. He reminds me a lot of Rafael Devers, the build, the swing. And while that might not keep him a catcher, he has the potential to be a really impactful hitter. And that's what a team can dream on if they're trading their ace. But I just think of the three of those guys, he's the one that is most likely to go in a deal for an impactful pitcher. But if I'm the Tigers, I want him and I want Kjerstad, among others, for Skubal. I have no reason to trade Skubal. I have him for 2.5 years. I can move him this offseason. I can move him next trade deadline, and I can still get a lot of value for him. So if you're not going to listen to my demands and you're not going to give me Basayo and Heston, who are both Basayo's probably now top 15, top 10 on a lot of lists. Heston, before he graduated, was top 50 on a lot of lists. I'm going to need two top 50 guys for me to move a possible Cy Young winner this year with 2 additional years of control.
And I think that's why I don't think Tariq Skubal ends up in Oriole. We're going to talk more about the trade deadline in a future episode, but I just want to get this in real quick. Basayo offers the ability to give Adley more days off later and later in his career. And I think that's also huge because Adley splits when he's not catching, days off from catching, I should say. Adley's days splits when he's not catching are crazy. He is just so much a better hitter when he is not squatting behind the plate for 2.5 hours, which makes a lot of sense. But that's kind of one of the things about Basayo that has me thinking if it's Basayo and Kjerstad, I don't make that move for Skubal because you have to give up both. I think it's hard to make that move for both, plus more prospects, especially if you can't get anything back in exchange. We're talking about the trade deadline. That's obviously, the first big moment of the second half. But a couple other second half predictions that I want to make here. The first is second half breakout candidate. You mentioned Colton Cowser on defense, and I think as great as he's been on defense, I think the offense is coming. I think a lot of his advanced metrics are where you want them to be. And it's a combination of luck. And yeah, he's going through that same dip that a lot of the Orioles prospects did when they came up, which is just learning to be more patient, getting used to that major league pitcher command of the strike zone that AAA pitchers just don't have, and kind of learning to balance kind of the patience that the Orioles preach in their minor league system with some of the aggression required to jump on early strikes from major league pitchers. I think that's kind of where Cowser's adjustment's going to be. But I also think he's going to get more playing time, continue to get more playing time, I should say, in the second half of the season because the Orioles are going to have the first half. They're going to have their statistical guys be able to analyze and see Cowser's metrics and see metrics that we don't even know or talk about and understand that he just needs the at-bats to continue to grow.
Yeah, the exit velos are there for Cowser. Really, the only thing that's holding him back from being an all-star right now are his strikeouts because the numbers all indicate that he's squaring balls up at an above average rate. And I know the batting average isn't where we like it, and people are complaining about his sort of swoon in the last couple of months. He's still hitting the ball hard. And ultimately, I'm sure this is what our hitting coaches are telling our guys. We are going up to the plate looking to do damage, hit the ball, hard at a certain angle so that we can try and get extra base hits. And I think that Cowser is doing that. It's just such a large sample size in baseball that you can go through these extended streaks where balls aren't falling, or you're trying to do your process, but you're getting pitched differently and you're striking out a lot, which is what he's doing. And striking out sucks, but he's a young player who's going to continue to grow and refine his approach. And I absolutely agree with you. I want to keep this guy here because of the impact on defense. And I think the bat is impactful too. I think he's going to be a big part of this team winning going forward for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's also kind of the clearest second half breakout candidate. The biggest prospect impact, though, Daniel, I want to see who you've got for the biggest potential prospect impact of the second half, because we've talked about Mayo's proximity to the majors, but there's also arguably a greater need on the mound. So, what do you think is going to win out in terms of second half prospect impact?
I got to say, I really think that McDermott is going to make an impact to the second half, whether it's in the rotation or just in the bullpen. I think this team is going to need arms. And while it may not be the biggest prospect impact if Kobe Mayo comes up and rakes or Connor Norby comes up and he does well, but we're going to need arms, I think. I think there's just too much shuffling of below average arms. This week we saw Birch Smith and Vinny Natoli in our bullpen. Like, I think there's going to come a point where Chase McDermott is striking out like 12 batters per nine in AAA like he is right now. And it's like, okay, we really want to keep Povich in the rotation. We really think that Albert Suarez is giving us valuable innings. And we're not going to change Dean Kramer's role because he's been doing this for so long. I think we're just going to need McDermott's arm in the bullpen, even if we don't put him in the rotation. And I think that his stuff is good enough, his swing and miss is good enough that he will be valuable in any role that we put him in. And that doesn't mean he's not going to start for us next year. It just means we need him up now in whatever role we can get him in.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me nervous about Mayo is just seeing that, all of the adjustments that the Orioles hitters prospect have needed every time they've come up. Every single one has come up and needed adjustments. And that's not the case for, I would say, every major prospect. There are some prospects who come up and rake, and the Orioles just haven't had that. And so it's hard for me to predict Mayo coming up and raking. Although I do think that the Orioles pretty badly need a right-handed infield bat. O'Hearn has been great, but then, they throw a lefty out there, and the Orioles don't necessarily have a ton of answers against lefties, in my opinion, right now. And I think that that's where Connor Norby could, I think, be big, is if he actually had his short time up. He didn't get that much time up to adjust, but I do think he will adjust faster than Mayo will. That's maybe a little bit of a bold prediction given how well Mayo has played, but I think Norby is just ready to be a major league player. And I think he is the kind of guy who, once he gets up, he has so many at bats under his belt that even if he's not playing consistently, when he's in the lineup, I think he's going to produce pretty well. So, one last thing I want to do here is a final record prediction. So, Daniel, how many wins do you think the Orioles are going to finish at this year? And what do you think that is going to get them in terms of the playoff seeding?
I think I think we're gonna see more struggles than we saw last year. Like we've already seen it. We've gotten swept a couple of times this year. We didn't get swept at all last year. I'm gonna guess we finish in the high 90s, like 96, 97. I think that probably gets the division done just because I think the Yankees are lacking depth in a big way, and the Red Sox will make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to win that many games. I think we'll probably end up getting the one seed with less than 100 wins as a division winner. And I've been saying this all year. I am not super pressed about getting the one seed in the playoffs. If we're a wild card, like, yeah, we have to go through an extra step to get to our ultimate goal. But the last couple World Series in this new playoff format, in the last 2 years, the NL representative has been the last seed in the playoffs. Like, you just need to get hot. If we can just hit the ball and prevent runs, we will go to the World Series. It doesn't matter how we do it. I hate to simplify it like that, but that's just how it is. You just need
Yeah,
to play
that is.
baseball well down the stretch. And
Yeah,
so
and I think
that's what it's going to take.
that's kind of where I was coming from with my prediction, because I actually think they win 98 games, but I still think they end up the wild card. I think that the Yankees break 100 wins. I think that their pitching in particular is just strong enough to get them through the regular season. And we'll see if their bullpen depth, I think that's where I'm most worried about the Yankees personally, is their bullpen depth in the playoffs, or what I think is the weakest, I should say. And but I still think that they have a stronger second half than the Orioles, because I just don't know if the Orioles add as much as at the deadline as the Yankees are willing to. I think the Yankees tend to be more willing to buy at the deadline than Elias will with his prospects, because this is the thing. Teams are, the Orioles' fourth best prospect is better than the Yankees' fourth best prospect. But teams have weird valuation systems, and I just think Elias is really intent on sticking to his. And that's why I think the Orioles don't add as much at the deadline that they would need to break 100 wins. I do think that they end up as the wild card. So, Daniel, I had a great time with you today. I'm really looking forward to getting this podcast off the ground and going. We talked a bit about the Orioles' top ranked farm system today, but we'll be diving much deeper next episode. We're going to recap the draft, throw around some trade ideas as we approach the deadline that we kind of hinted at today, but I think we're going to put together some concrete proposals that the Orioles should pursue. Daniel, any last thing to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that when Nikhil and I were planning this episode, we said, oh, let's try and keep it like max 30 minutes so that people don't lose interest. But Nikhil and I know each other too well. So if you guys want to listen to some real banter about the Orioles, we have known each other for a long time. We grew up watching the Orioles and Ravens together. So you are going to get some real entertaining banter from this podcast. Please tune in. I'm Daniel Rada. You can find me on Twitter at DROT_6. You can also find me writing about fantasy baseball for Sports Ethos. If you play that, I put out a weekly piece regarding fab targets in deeper leagues for you all who might play on National Fantasy Baseball Championship, NFBC. So please go check those out as well. And I can't wait to get back into this Orioles discussion next week, Nikhil.
Thanks so much, Daniel. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Knows Ball. That's actually a recent rebrand. If you know me, I had a different Twitter handle earlier. Training camp Ravens is coming up. I'm going to be heavily covering that too, as well as the rest of the Orioles season. Thank you so much for joining, and looking forward to having you in the future.
1, 2.